Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Gear Up. Myself, Jack Appleyard and Louis Suddaby here live from the TT Circuit Assen in the Netherlands ahead of the Grand Prix of the Netherlands, the historic Dutch TT, and it is set up quite nicely. What a lot of people are calling a must-win weekend for Aprilia as they try and bite back at the resurgent Ducati and Marc Marquez. 40 points now split in the current world champion with the world championship leader Marco Bezzecchi, with Bez's teammate Jorge Martin now only 8 points adrift of him. It is set up quite nicely for another brilliant weekend of MotoGP under what is going to be blazing sunshine. We will touch on that in a second, Lewis, because coming into the weekend, it's news that we were all expecting to filter through, but it doesn't make it any less seismic. Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, 3 bits of news that have sent shockwaves around the MotoGP world and beyond. The world champion, Marc Marquez, is remaining in red. A 2-year extension has been signed for 2027 and 2028, and he will have a new man in the box alongside him. What a partnership this is. Pedro Acosta now officially a Ducati rider from next year, which meaning Pecco Bagnaia out for a job, well, only for 24 hours. He's going to be teaming up with his good friend Marco Bezzecchi at the Factory Aprilia squad next year. That's all to come in 6 months' time, but still huge news and pretty mouth-watering for what's to come next year, Lewis.
Yeah, I think we described the Marquez-Bagnaia combination as a dream team at the Factory Ducati squad. This is almost the dream team 2.0, isn't it, for the Ducati team? The blend of youth and experience. We're already seeing Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta entertainers this season already when it was Ducati versus KTM. Just imagine the fireworks we're going to have between the two of them when they are Factory Ducati teammates as part of what is, of course, a new era in terms of bikes, in terms of tyres, a new era for the Factory Ducati squad. Marc Marquez going up against head-to-head, same bike, same machinery, same team as many who consider him the new Marc Marquez. Absolutely fascinating. For many, regarded as the top 2 talents on the MotoGP grid, and they will both be in red next year. Quite the task for this man, Davide Tardozzi, to try and manage next year. Here is the Ducati team boss just walking in now. Good afternoon, how are you?
Good.
So, quite a big week for Ducati. You have officially locked down Marc Marquez for another 2 years, despite those possible retirement rumours. He's going absolutely nowhere, and he's got quite a fast teammate coming in Pedro Acosta. Just your first reaction to that, now that it's all been officially finalised?
Yeah, we think that we fix up the strongest team is possible for us for the next 2 years. So it's we are very happy about this lineup, and we'll see.
A lot of people, we were just saying, believe that you've managed to sign the 2 biggest talents on the MotoGP grid. Would you agree with that?
We think so, but yeah, as usual, Ducati try hard to have the best lineup on the rider side is possible. We had it in the past, and we think we will have for the future.
Looking at Ducati's approach to rider signings in the past, if I look at Jack, look at Pecco, look at Enea, even looking at Marc, they've all come from other Ducati teams in the family. The fact that you've gone to another manufacturer to take their top rider in Pedro Acosta, is that a sign of just how special a talent you think he is?
Yeah, I think that Pedro was the talent that every factory would like to have for the next future. He's young, fast, and his career is really bright because, you know, he won in the Talent Cup, Moto3, Moto2. Unfortunately, he hasn't done yet in MotoGP, but he will. Anyway, we think that he's the best rider we can have for the future, even for many years, if it's possible.
Of course, I'm sure there is a tinge of sadness for Ducati as well, that the story with Pecco is going to come to an end at the end of this season. Just sum up, if you can, the contribution of Pecco Bagnaia to Ducati and how sad you will be to see him go.
Pecco did an incredible contribution. Pecco is almost a rider that bring up after Casey the factory, the bike, and the titles to Ducati. So we will always be grateful to him. 31 winning, 28 pole, 63 podium, 2 titles, twice runner-up. I mean, it's something that will be in the history of Ducati forever. And on top of that, it's not only that, the person. I think that Pecco is an incredible gentleman, is an incredible guy, and it will be our friends forever.
As you say, Pecco, a huge part of the Ducati's history. Nobody has won more World Championships for Ducati. Nobody has won more races, more poles, more podiums for Ducati. When his what will now be last contract was announced, Claudio Domenicali described Pecco as the perfect Ducati rider. So over the last 18 months, what has changed?
You know, it comes the moment that technical side and other things doesn't go properly, and sometimes it's better for both parties to share, but this doesn't mean that the personal relationship is brought. We know that it happens. He knows, he finally understood that in this moment is better for both, so we wish him to be always the best opponent we can have behind us. But a joke. But yeah, it will be the moment after 8 years that we both decide that it's better to follow different ways.
And when announcing Pecco as an Aprilia rider today, Aprilia have taken great joy in confirming the fact that they have an all-Italian lineup next year compared to Ducati's all-Spanish lineup. If you had to choose between a rider that's Italian and a rider that's capable of fighting for and winning world championships, what would your preference be? Are you bothered at all by the fact that you don't have any Italians on an Italian bike next year?
We always look to the fast riders and not to the passport. I mean, Aprilia had a Spanish lineup till a couple of years ago. Now I don't know why everybody have to underline that there are Italians or not Italians. This is a world where I think that the best riders has to be higher, to be on the top position, to fight for the championship and winnings. So I don't think that the passport is something important. If for somebody else it is, maybe it's important for them, not for us.
Well, Davide, before we let you go, you might have seen we had this game with us during the pre-season where we were trying to predict who was going to go where. Well, no predictions are now necessary because the Ducati factory lineup is confirmed. So if you would come with me, as you can see, we have Pedro Acosta and Marc Marquez. I'll let you have the honour of making sure that your 2027 lineup is officially locked in. There we go. That looks quite good. It looks quite strong.
Yeah. I think that the lineup for the next 2 years is really incredible. Mark, no description for him. I think that whatever it was said is not enough because it's more than the 9 title, is more than the 101 winnings. Is an incredible guy, an incredible leader inside the garage. While Pedro, I think that is the future. Is a bright diamond.
Davide, great to see you. Have a great weekend here in Assen.
Thank you.
There we go. So that's one team officially locked in, and as Davide said, a pretty strong one at that as well in Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta. I'll take over and pretend I'm Massimo Rivola because we can officially confirm Aprilia's lineup for next year as well. Oh, careful. That's first crash of 2027 for Pecco Bagnaia. There he is, next to his good friend, Marco Bezzecchi. And just look at that. 12 months ago, if you would have predicted that it would be Acosta teaming up with Marquez and Bagnaia teaming up with his great VR46 buddy in Marco Bezzecchi, that certainly would have got tongues wagging. I think we're in for quite a treat in 2027.
And Davide Tardozzi making it very, very clear there that the nationality of his rider is of secondary, if that, importance. It's all about what they bring to Ducati and the results they're going to bring. And there's no question that Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta will do that. I guess the big challenge that Davide will have next season is potentially controlling the egos, because we know that Pedro Acosta, he's not going to go in there deliberately to try and mess with Marc Marquez, deliberately to try and upset Marc Marquez, but he is not going to go there and in any way feel inferior when he goes to Ducati next season.
And that's a great point you make as well, because no matter what team managers, no matter what personnel might say of, we don't have a number 1 and a number 2 rider, there is always a number 1 and a number 2 rider in the box. And for Davide Tardozzi, for Gigi Dall'Igna next year, they have got 2 alpha males who will not want to give an inch to the
Second is
other
failure
one.
for them.
Exactly. It is going to be fascinating to see how they are able to control that intra-team battle, because the pair of them have got such a weight of gravity that they just draw people in. You can see what Pedro Acosta was able to do in the KTM box. How on earth are you going to have those two forces in the same box together? Normally when you have two sizable atoms, Lewis, the inevitable is they come crashing together. I imagine we're going to see some pretty feisty clashes next year.
We've already seen them, haven't we, this year? Pedro Acosta and Marc Marquez went head-to-head in the very first sprint of the season in Buriram. Controversial battle it was. I said at the time that felt like Marc Marquez saying to Pedro, hey, Junior, get in your place, in the move that he put him, and ultimately cost him the sprint wings. Of course, he got the penalty as a result of it. We saw them go head-to-head in Mugello very recently as well, when Marc was just coming back from that injury. And of course, given what's happened in the last couple of Grand Prix, there is still every chance that Pedro Acosta might be joining as teammate of the reigning world champion, because those chances for Marc Marquez have gone up several folds since we spoke on his return from injury, and we thought 100 points back he was out of the championship. Now he's firmly back in it.
Absolutely. Right, we've spoken 27, as you allude to there. Let's put our focus into this weekend, which, coming into it, we said it on Sunday night after what we saw unfold in Brno, that it was arguably going to be a must-win weekend for Aprilia and for Marco Bezzecchi in particular. A few days on, do we still think that's the case? It does seem to me like maybe not must win at this part of the season, but one thing for certain, they A, have to stop the rot, and B, have to stop the Ducati momentum that is really starting to gather some speed.
Yeah, that's why I think it feels like a must win. I don't think it necessarily is. Of course, for them to win the championship, they don't have to win this weekend. There's an awful lot of races to go. But there's no question that this is going to be a more favourable circuit for Aprilia than the Sachsenring will be. We're all fully expecting Marc Marquez to take maximum points at the Sachsenring. It's not a guarantee, nothing is in MotoGP, but it feels that way when Marc Marquez goes to what is that predominantly left-handed circuit at the Sachsenring. And of course, having won the last two, very much winning against the run of play last weekend in Brno, the way that weekend was shaping up. And then, of course, this all takes place against the backdrop of what's happened to Aprilia in the last two Grand Prix weekends, taking each other out in the Hungarian Grand Prix. Of course, a crash that led to Martin's double long lap, which, of course, he couldn't really recover from. He was never going to finish down in 9th place last weekend. And, of course, the firestorm around Marco Bezzecchi after what happened after he crashed out of the sprint on the Saturday. Bezzecchi, I think, more than anything, will be very, very pleased when he can just put the helmet on, shut the visor down, and focus on the job at hand again tomorrow morning.
Yeah, Marco Bezzecchi, I'm sure, hoping to try and just block all of the noise out that has certainly been gathering momentum since that incident on Saturday at the Brno at the Czech Grand Prix. He spoke to the media for the very first time today following on from that incident. Here's what he had to say. Okay, hopefully we'll hear from Marco Bezzecchi later in the show. As we mentioned, in terms of blocking the noise out, how important is that going to be? Just a straightforward weekend without any issues for him to just focus on the job at hand again?
Very important, I think, because ultimately Marco Bezzecchi, whatever he does on and off the track, there will be certain people, and he can't control this, there'll be certain people who will never forgive him for what he did last weekend. There'll be some who forgave him instantly and understood the emotion that went into that. Marco Bezzecchi now has to just focus on his job, which is riding in Aprilia as fast as anyone in the world. He does still lead the World Championship, which is easy to forget given all the negative noise surrounding him. He does still lead the World Championship. His lead is now 8 points over Jorge Martin. I think perhaps more importantly, 40 points over Marc Marquez, which does not feel like a big lead at all given how strong Aprilia have been so far this season. And he does have a very, very good record here at the TT Circuit Assen. He won a sprint here in 2023, double podium here last season as well. So this is a circuit, I think if Marco could have chosen a circuit to come to, given what happened last weekend, this would have been very high up the list.
I was just going to say exactly the same. For a circuit that he needed to bounce back at, a circuit where he can instantly find his rhythm, find his flow. You feel as though that this one is right at the top of the list, given his record around here and given the nature of the circuit as well. Not only do we feel that it's going to be a circuit that clearly has suited Marco Bezzecchi regardless of motorcycle, this 2026 Aprilia and all of its strengths should fit quite brilliantly to Assen and what it has to offer.
Fast and flowing circuit, very much a momentum circuit, should very much play into the strengths of both Marco and the Aprilia. It is going to be interesting though, because I think there's a general feeling now. We mentioned it after the flag just 4 days ago. It feels as if the Ducati and the Aprilia are on a pretty level playing field now, pretty level pegging. It doesn't feel as if Aprilia have the advantage we thought they had at the start of the season when, of course, they weren't up against a fully fit Marc Marquez, which I guess comes back to your original question that if for some reason, Aprilia don't win here, if they get beaten by a Ducati here this weekend, and that's why we're talking about it feeling like a must-win. If Ducati beat Aprilia here, given what's to come in the second half of the season, then I think there will be alarm bells ringing in Nuali.
And given the nature of the calendar as well, I put it to Jorge Martin earlier that looking long-term, the fact that we go to the Saxon Ring in 2 weeks' time and there's already almost a feel of inevitability about what's going to happen there now that Mark's managing to rediscover his form again, to then go into the summer break when you've got 3 weeks to sit and stew over what's happened in the opening half of the season. I think that's why we all feel this is a weekend where Aprilia really need to strike back. On the other side of the box, 8 points adrift after what's felt like a really tough period for Jorge Martin, following on from the Le Mans race where he was so impressive. It's really started to fall apart since there, but somehow the wonders of this championship, despite not having any form whatsoever, despite not having any feeling, Jorge Martin is saying, he somehow reduced the gap. 8 points, the difference between himself and Marco Bezzecchi now. It, again, feels a big weekend for him as well. Jorge saying earlier, the biggest thing for him, never mind must win, is just to find that feeling that he has had through parts of this season, but not on a consistent basis just yet.
Yeah, because we're all using all sorts of football analogies at the moment with the World Cup taking place. Jorge Martin's almost staying in the game at the minute, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's not at his best, he's far from it, but he's just doing enough. He's getting the points on the board. We were both at his media scrum with the written press earlier on today, and he spoke of not really having any sort of perfect feeling. The only weekend he says he's had a perfect feeling with the bike was the weekend where he did the double at Le Mans. Not confident with the bike, not confident with the front end for much of the weekend in Brno, and I think that was the big surprise, wasn't it? Because it wasn't like the Aprilia was slow in Brno, because Ayagura nearly won the sprint, nearly won the Grand Prix, it was a very close second in each, but Jorge Martin, even if you park the double long lap penalty to one side, Jorge Martin still wasn't going to win that weekend. He still probably wasn't going to be on the podium that weekend, just did not have the speed, and I think that will worry him and worry Aprilia more than some of the outside factors, the crashes, the altercations with marshals that Marco Bezzecchi's had. Aprilia, and particularly Aprilia's factory team, have not been as competitive, whatever way you slice it, since they took a 1-2 back in Mugello.
No, absolutely. And Massimo Rivola himself, when he came to speak to the media following on from last weekend's Czech Grand Prix, admitted to the fact that, yes, I love having riders that wear their heart on their sleeve, put their all, show their passion, but there's a fine line, and at the moment the emotion has been boiling over ever so slightly, and he says he takes full responsibility of making sure that he draws that back in and he starts to see his riders channeling that passion and that emotion in a more positive manner than what we've seen in recent weeks, because yes, the incident with Marco Bezzecchi and the Marshal obviously grabbed headlines around the world, but it's not an isolated incident. We've seen Jorge pushing Paolo Bonora. We've seen Massimo himself walking down and giving the finger wag to Davide Tardozzi. There's been a couple of coming togethers between their riders, so it's something that Massimo does need to get on top of before we go into the second half of the season if the Aprilias are to remain in this title fight, which we believe they do, but they're going to have to work together to beat Marc Marquez. They certainly can't be shooting themselves in the foot, a phrase that Jorge Martin himself used quite ironically now ahead of the Czech Grand Prix. Right, we'll speak on Marc Marquez and his ambitions to try and reclaim the World Championship in a second, but we promised you to hear from Marco Bezzecchi, the World Championship leader, so I'm going to deliver on that promise. Here's Bez speaking ahead of this, the Dutch TT.
Marco, I know it's obviously not been an easy last few days, so how have you been and how have you reflected on what unfolded in Brno?
Yeah, of course, as you said, was not an easy couple of days. Obviously, I want to take this chance to apologize one more time for my actions, and I really didn't manage in any good way what happened to me. So I felt extremely sorry for the team, for all the Aprilia, obviously for the Marshal, and I regret a lot. But unfortunately I can't go back with the time, so I accept everything by everyone, and I just try to move forward.
Moving forward into Assen, of course, Marco, a brilliant weekend here last year. How hard is it going to be to get back into the groove this weekend, do you feel, or are you going to try, well, put it behind you what happened and get back on the bike and do your talking on the track, let's say?
Well, is what I need to do. I mean, of course, the days after the Brno GP weren't easy at all. So the only thing that I can do is jump on the bike and try to relax in that way. I mean, yeah, go on the bike is the best solution.
Obviously, Mark's won the last 2 Grand Prix. The championship is closed down. How much are you thinking about that at this stage of the season? And is a big result important, not just for the championship, but also just to try and get some points back on the board after obviously Balaton wasn't your fault, but 0 points scored on Sunday there as well?
Well, the championship is super close, but in my mind was already close a lot of time ago, because right now with the sprint and the GP you can gain and lose a lot of points in a very short amount of time. So Mark obviously is the current world champion, so we should never rule out him from the fight, and we all know how Mark is. So but anyway, for me the most important is try to go back on the bike and feel good.
Good weekend coming up in Assen in terms of feeling on the bike. As mentioned, you had a brilliant weekend here last year, so if you were going to pick a circuit to come back to, maybe Assen would be close to the top.
Yeah, it's a track that I really love. It's fantastic for me. I enjoy a lot riding here. Of course, it's good. It's good.
I've just got to ask about the 850 as well, Marco. A busy Monday test, I'm sure. What can you tell us? What can we expect from next year? And how nice was it to get an early indication of what the 850 motorcycle might be like next year?
Well, it was a very good day, first of all, because I needed to jump on the bike after everything, and was, I think, one of the days where I got more emotions on the bike, even if it was only a test. But apart from this, the bike was super cool. It's true that it's very early, and from everyone, I think the amount of job that the factory needs to do is a lot, and also that I need to do to adapt will be a lot. But it was a good first contact with the bike. I enjoyed. The track was very good, and I think the performance was not too bad. Of course, as I said before, it's very early, but yeah, at the end. I don't want to think about it too much, because I must concentrate on the current season that is going well, and we want to continue in this way. But anyway, it was a very good day.
Thank you, Marco. Sorry, one last question, because I did forget. Pecco obviously announced as your teammate for 2027.
I was waiting for this.
Yeah, it was a problem. Not a problem for you though, Marco, to welcome Pecco next year. It's obviously very exciting for us and for you to welcome a new teammate. So how do you see that relationship going, and how excited are you to welcome Pecco into your family, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful news, of course. I'm happy for Aprilia, for the team, but also all the factory in Noale, and obviously for Pecco. I'm very curious to see how it will be to share the box, because at the end we've been rivals always, but never so close all the day. So it will be cool, but obviously I'm also super happy about how things are going at the moment, because the mood inside the box is fantastic. The relationship with Jorge is good, and I found also, apart from a great rider, a very good guy. So I'm happy obviously for what will be the situation with Pecco next year, but I'm also very concentrated on what we are doing this year. So let's try to keep working.
Thank you, Marco. Have a good weekend. Thank you. I can keep my job now as well.
Yeah, Elliot York, I'm hoping will keep his job. He's a good friend of ours. But anyway, if that is the end, Elliot, really appreciate your efforts over the last few years. We wish you well in your future endeavours. One man that is sticking around is Marco Bezzecchi. As he mentioned there, teammating up with Pecco Bagnaia, who we're going to hear from in the press conference in just over 5 minutes' time. That relationship, on a different angle, is going to be very different to that of Mark and Pedro Acosta. We know that those are two alphas that are going to be butting heads, battling out on track. Same for Marco Bezzecchi and Pecco Bagnaia, but in a very different manner, in that friendship is so strong already. You do worry, and Pecco referenced this earlier as well, that when they're in that high-pressure environment, there's no souring of that relationship. And when they're spending so much time together at the track, away from the track, there is that possibility. I'm sure that they're mature enough to put that to one side, but it is one of the fascinating dynamics of next year.
It is. We've spoken before about the trash talk that usually goes back and forth between the two. It'd be very easy to exchange that next season when we're only sitting about 20 feet away either sides of the Aprilia box. But I think given what we're going into next season with the change of regulations, it's going to be so important for teammates to work together in the early part of next season, particularly in pre-season testing, which is going to be pretty limited. Of course, every day on the bike, every lap on the bike is going to be like gold dust when you're testing a brand new concept effectively in MotoGP next season. So it's going to be important for Marco and for Pecco to work together. Of course, I guess what's caught us all, not by surprise, but certainly caught our attention is that Pecco has signed a 4-year contract with the factory Aprilia team. Now, Marco, I don't think is the kind of person that will necessarily get his nose put out of joint by that, knowing that his teammate is on such a long-term contract. I'm sure he'll be getting paid very handsomely by Aprilia next season too. But Pecco with 4 years under his belt at the factory Aprilia team, so he's got plenty of time to bed himself in at the factory Aprilia team. But like Pedro, of course, Pecco being a world champion himself, he's not going there to play number 2 to Marco Bezzecchi. And of course, much like we talk about Pedro potentially joining the world champion, same is true of Pecco. He might well be joining the world champion at Aprilia next year.
Absolutely. Pecco Bagnaia locked into Aprilia until the end of 2030, which seems like a lifetime away right now.
What, 33?
Yeah,
like
it's a huge investment from Aprilia and a huge show of support from them to give him that kind of a deal. And when you look through MotoGP history, certainly MotoGP recent history, 4-year deals have never
mixed results,
never particularly ended that well. So, I mean, fingers crossed for Bagnaia. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of clauses in there, but it is a shock in modern MotoGP, especially I think the big thing that has surprised people at the start of a regulation change when nobody really knows who's going to be the top dog, who's going to be the top manufacturer. To lock yourself in for that time frame is a huge decision by both parties.
Yeah, Pecco Bagnaia, I guess he's in a strong position because he's a 2-time world champion, but I guess his stock has dropped in the last year and a half or so. So you could argue Pecco needs Aprilia as much as Aprilia need Pecco at this stage. There was talk right at the start of the season. The last time we had that board out at the start of the season in Japan, we thought Pecco was potentially going to Yamaha next season. Clearly, Aprilia made a very big push and a big play to sign Pecco Bagnaia, and clearly their trump card was the longevity, the security of a 4-year contract to bring Pecco Bagnaia across from one Italian team to another. Of course, we already put that question to Davide Tardozzi about Aprilia making it very clear in both their video and their press release that they had an all-Italian lineup. And of course, Ducati, Nicolo Bulliga potentially, if he does join VR46, might be the only Italian amongst 5 other Spaniards on Ducati bikes next season. So Aprilia very much keen to flex their muscles in that respect. After winning the Italian Grand Prix, they want to, I guess, make a case that they are the Italian national team now.
Absolutely. We see Massimo Rivola just walking behind us. He's going to be the Capitano. In fact, what a moment this is. Oh, we've just missed it. Massimo Rivola stopping to have a very quick wave in the direction of Marc Marquez. Them two going to be battling it out for years to come, it seems. Let's focus on this week, and then we've touched on the key title contenders. A question I always ask around this time: who are the dark horses this weekend? Who are the riders we need to be keeping our eye on? Because I think very easy at this point of the season, given the state of the championship, for full focus to be on Bez, Martin, Marquez. It feels as though those 3 are the ones that are going to be fighting for the World Championship up to the very end, with no disrespect in the direction of Fabio Giovinazzi and Pedro Acosta, but it feels as though at this moment those are the 3 that everyone is going to be watching very closely.
Yeah, I'm interested to follow Pecco Bagnaia this weekend too. His record, put last year to one side, even though he did still finish just off the podium, on the podium in the end in that Grand Prix. Bagnaia at his best was unbeatable around Assen. If you go back to 2024, I think that was the weekend where he topped every single session in the weekend, and Bagnaia never does that, but he topped 3 practice 1 and went on to dominate the weekend here on his way to victory in 2024. So if Bagnaia is anything like his best, he will be very, very difficult to beat around this circuit. Pedro Acosta, naturally, he pretty much owns that dark horse tag so far this season, doesn't he, on board that KTM. Doesn't feel necessarily as if this is going to be as strong a KTM track as some of the recent venues we've been to. Not got a great record around here.
Needs to see a checkered flag at the moment as well.
Needs to see a checkered flag. The KTM's been fairly competitive under Pedro Acosta when it's been running. Problem is, it hasn't been running at the checkered flag, both on Saturday and Sunday last weekend. Acosta ultimately scoring nothing through outside factors.
That's a big question for me tomorrow. I'll be straight down in the direction of the factory KTM garage to get a word from Macchiaio as to what really is happening down at KTM at the moment, because they are in a bit of a reliability hole at the moment. There's a clear issue there. It's happening time and time again. So let's see. Pedro Acosta himself was claiming for some kind of resolution, some kind of answer, saying that the factory Matterhofen do need to work in this short break in between the Czech Grand Prix and the Dutch TT, because those reliability issues are really hurting them at the moment. When it comes to Honda, a great result last time out for Joan Mir. Let's see if he can back that one up. And for Yamaha, I want to mention we've sort of skirted around the test on Monday, the first 850 test for official riders, someone that caught everybody's eye there, Toprak Razgatlioglu. It looks as though if you're a fan of the Turk, you might not be having much to shout about in 2026. 2027, let me guarantee you, is going to be a whole lot better. Toprak, very impressive apparently at that test.
Yeah, very impressive. Two of the names I'll very quickly mention from those manufacturers you mentioned. Diogo Moreira, watch him close this weekend. He's on a good run of Q2 performances. Took his first Moto2 win here last year. And Fabio Quartararo, last year's pole sitter. Surely if there's a circuit in the rest of the calendar that will suit him and the Yamaha, it's this one.
Absolutely. Lots to look forward to as the 2027 dominoes start to fall into place. There's still plenty to be settled in 2026 on track as well. 8 points difference between Marco Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin. Marc Marquez now 40 points adrift, but this a press conference that will have a little bit of a 2027 feel to it as well, as the current Ducati teammates in Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia are joined by Marc Marquez's future Ducati teammate in Pedro Acosta. I'm looking forward to this one. It could be fireworks. Matt Burt, over to you. Enjoy.